I'm Roland Freudenstein. I'm the Deputy Director of the Center for European Studies, which is the foundation of the European People's Party. I think that the EU, for several reasons, has not achieved the credit, has not received the credit that it should get from the citizens. Partly because it is bureaucratic. And in a way, it's not only bureaucratic, but it's the combination of 28 national bureaucracies. And that makes it sometimes extremely hard to understand. It makes it hard to sell. It makes it hard to be explained in the media. And so that's already a big handicap. And the other one is that, of course, an organization like the European Union with more and more member states always requires compromise. That's another thing that's difficult. And then we still don't have something like a government on the European level, so we also don't have an opposition in parliament. This is all very murky. All these factors combine and mean that it is difficult to explain Europe to people, and it's also difficult for people to become really fascinated by this. Now, what can we do? I think certainly to make the European elections more interesting would be one way to do so. That means, sharpening different alternatives, policy alternatives in the election campaign, making clear that the socialists do not want the same thing as the center-right, and also giving these campaigns a human face in the form of top candidates for the big political families. I certainly hope there's going to be a political clash, and I certainly hope it's not only going to be about how beautiful the European Union is. Because, we now have all kinds of opinion polls and prognoses and analyses that the populists and the nationalists are going to get much, much stronger in the next European Parliament. Now, some people draw from this the conclusion that that means we have to campaign for Europe in these elections. Well, if all the democratic, moderate political forces campaign for Europe, I think we actually corroborate the narrative, the storytelling by the populists that there's one big Brussels elite that always wants more power for Europe. I think we should use this election campaign as an opportunity to make it clear that what the differences are between our political family, the EPP, European People's Party, and the socialists, because these are the main antagonists in these elections. And the socialists, they're criticizing so-called austerity, and they want a kind of economic government here in Brussels. They're also not as committed to our central values of liberty and freedom and human rights as we are in foreign relations, for example, in our Eastern policy. So, for all these reasons, I think we should make it clear that we think differently. We believe in fiscal consolidation as a precondition for sustainable growth. We believe that the European Union should get bigger on the big things, but smaller on the small things. And that means it also has to produce less legislation, not more. We do not believe in an economic government that sets tax levels and pension systems and decides them from Brussels. We want these policy fields to remain in national competence. What we have is a paradox. On the one hand, we're feeling more and more European. A Spanish election becomes a matter for domestic political debate in Germany. Before the election in Germany, you had a completely unprecedented degree of attention of the international press, especially in countries like Greece. So, we all realize how interdependent we are. Now, paradoxically, this has also caused a lot of bad feelings among the European nations. I think it is impossible to go back to the good old nation states. That is not an option. Populists are are problem seekers, not problem solvers, and they don't have anything to offer in terms of a constructive solution. It will take some while for that to sink in with public opinion. For the moment, it's more the emotions that play a role here.
And how can we overcome these emotions or feelings?
By successfully overcoming the crisis and bringing Europe firmly back on the track of sustainable growth.
And is the EU taking the right steps for this?
I think we're by and large on the right way. Yeah. You know, I think we have, you know, in most governments, in most member states, we have a strategy of first consolidating our finances and economic reform, and then trying to get to growth, and which is sustainable and produces jobs. We have first of all kept the Eurozone together. We have created a system which will prevent crises like the 2008 one to ever happen again. It will not happen in this form anymore because we have become smarter. And third, I think we have laid the groundwork to bring Europe back on the track of sustainable growth. You know, these are three things that have happened in the last couple of years, and I think they're going to be, they are bearing fruit, and they are going to bear fruit even more visibly in the next couple of months and years. And I think people will see that, and that's the only way to, you know, to increase trust in the European institutions again. I think in order to have growth with jobs, we need to focus much more on small and medium enterprise. We need to focus more on cutting red tape, on making it easier to start up new companies. All this goes also towards creating jobs for young people. You know, we need to create digital Europe. You know, we're losing business every day, and therefore also jobs and potentials for growth, because we don't have a digital single market in the European Union. We also need to cut good trade deals with outside partners, most of all with the United States. You know, all these, and we need to increase mobility and flexibility on the labor market. I think all these are things that can and must be helped from the European institution level. And I think it is possible to do something here. So, you know, right now it may look like jobless growth might be an option, but I think a few years down the line, we can, if we take the right decisions today, we can look much better and we can have growth with jobs.
Is Europe going to lose the race with the BRICS?
Well, it's not a race really, you know. I mean, we're not in a daily competition for exactly the same market segment. I think if we manage to innovate, if we manage to invest in education, skills, and if we become more flexible on our labor markets, I think we can move into higher market segments and therefore not necessarily play in the same league as the BRICS. Because the BRICS, you know, if we exactly play in the same league as the BRICS and try to offer the same products as the BRICS, I don't think we have very many chances, seeing that people in the BRICS come from very poor conditions and are willing to work much longer hours for much less income. So we can't compete with that, but we can try to move into onto a different level of sophistication in services and in industrial products. If global trade and the global economy was a zero-sum game, then indeed we would be lost. You know, we could never sustain our so-called European social model. You know, but we can reform the European social model and live in a more 21st century version of it, and we can actually create a win-win situation with the BRICS if we have the right attitude and we take the right strategic decisions today. And that includes openness and reform. You know, 100 years ago, a German intellectual, conservative German intellectual named Oswald Spengler started his 2-volume work about the morphology of world history, and the title was The Decline of the West. right?
Oh, that's when it started.
He was a guru. This man Spengler was a guru of my grandfather.
Untergang des Abendlandes.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Well, I mean, methodologically, this book is nonsense, but it had a huge influence on the generation at the time. You know, the World War I, especially post-World War I generation in Germany, as my grandfather was, they considered this man a guru, and they were hugely influenced by his thought. You know, then came the 1930s, and it seemed like really, I mean, with Hitler and Stalin on the rise, I mean, the West was really foutu, as they say in French. It really seemed like there was no future for democratic capitalism. And look what happened. You know, these authoritarian rulers more or less finished themselves, or, you know, successively over a span of 40 years, 50 years. And suddenly in the 1990s, it looked like it was the end of history, and you know, the combination between political and economic freedom had won the day. Well, you know, it only took a few years until 9/11, when, you know, global liberty seemed to have gone out the window. And then in 2008, even the Western model of the market economy seemed to be in doubt. Today we're wondering whether the Chinese are beating us at our own game. You know, whether our thesis, what I call the meaning of 1989, is that actually political and economic freedom are mutually dependent. You know, today it seems like the Chinese are proving that this is not true. In fact, you can have a more effective market economy with less political freedom. Well, I think we owe them an answer. I think this claim is not true. It just takes longer than it took in Europe to prove that, in fact, you cannot have ultimately safe development, safe economic development, and social stability without a certain degree of political freedom and multi-party democracy. There are people in Europe who are saying that we shouldn't even be dependent on the US, and we should actually sometimes play against the US together with the Indians or the Chinese or the Russians or whoever. Yeah, there are such people, but I'm afraid they're completely mistaken. And you know, by now, both the US and Europe are so challenged by the rest of the world that actually going separate ways makes us completely and insignificantly weak, you know. So our only chance is to band together. And that's maybe the good news. I mean, there's good news and the bad news. The bad news is that both America and Europe are in relative decline compared to the rest of the world. That's for sure. It's not the end of the West, but relatively speaking, we're getting weaker. But I think this will, maybe after some transatlantic differences, it will ultimately bring us closer together. It will just take some more years.
Your father says your Twitter account. Your children, will they have a better future than you have? Will they have the same welfare standards as we currently experience?
That's a good question. I mean, it depends on what you understand by welfare standards. I don't think that they will have the same degree of state-guaranteed health care, state-guaranteed pensions, state-guaranteed, you know, minimum guarantees for existence as my generation had. You know, in that sense, you know, I was born in 1960. I was certainly part of a golden cohort, as we call it in Germany. But my children, there's no guarantee whatsoever that they will live in the same kind of general prosperity. But they certainly have a chance to achieve that prosperity with their own means, by their own skills. But I think a kind of public or state-sponsored guarantee will not be there. And certainly in that sense, it's a tougher outlook. And this is, you know, this is something that we will take a long time to get used to in the West. It doesn't mean that we have to, that the only thing that's left to us is to manage our decline. I think we have a much more positive potential, and therefore we have to work for it.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thanks.